Hi there and welcome back. I hope you had a good weekend. This is Jennifer McGuire, and today I'm sharing with you many creative ways for using your stacking dies. Now, stacking dies are any die set where you have one shape but many sizes of that shape. Some of these are basic, like circles and squares. Some have scallop edges, some have faux stitching. It doesn't matter, you can use probably what you have. I'm going to show you a few ways to create kind of graphic card designs using these sets. So let's get started with the basics. We'll create this card that looks like it was created with border dies, but I actually used a square die set. This set is the one that I'm going to use for several examples today. This is the Honeybee Stitched Scallop Square die set. The largest square here is 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches. Now this is a new set for me, so I'm going to keep them connected. You can use your little die snippers to cut them apart if you want to. I'm just cutting out the little flower in the center. If you have stacking dies that you've already cut apart, you can still do this technique. All you do is flip them over, space them nicely, and then put tape on the back so that they're all connected. Now for some of my examples, instead of cardstock, I'm going to use thick mulberry paper. Mulberry paper usually is thin, so thin that you can almost see through it, but this is much thicker and it has a very soft feel to it. I just thought it would kind of add a little bit of interest to the card. I will link to a couple different thick mulberry paper packs that I like in the description below. So I'm trimming these down to 6 by 6 so I can easily die cut them and save the rest. Now I'm using my Gemini Junior die cut machine today. However, you can use these dies with any traditional die cut machine. For the Gemini Junior, I just find that it cuts great every time. And also it's auto feed. Once you put the plates in, it feeds the plates through so you can go ahead and go on to the next step of your project or have a giant sip of coffee. Okay, so now I have cut this from the different colors of mulberry paper. So I actually picked 5 different colors for this card. And I'm going through and putting them in piles of the same size square. That just helps to put them together. Now you can see you have lots of pieces here. So I have enough to make 5 cards or even more, maybe 10 cards, depending on the design I use. But I'm going to show one here for you first. So I've flipped my squares over and I'm just putting a rainbow of squares together. Once I have them together, I'm going to put tape on the back of it. You can use absolutely any tape you may have. I used Micropore Tape, but you could definitely use masking tape or Scotch tape. You could even cut one large cardstock square and glue all the pieces onto it. But I thought this was pretty quick and easy. So here's the fun part. We have this one square and we can actually cut it up to create several cards. Here I'm cutting it in half from one corner to another, and we have these two really neat looking pieces that we can glue onto the card any way we want. You can get some really fun graphic designs, or if you want to, you can cut it in half again and have 2 smaller triangles that you can use on cards. That's what I'll do for my first example. Now for this, I'm using Be Creative tape, but you can use any adhesive that you may have. And I'll glue one triangle to the bottom corner of a card and the other triangle to the top corner of a card. And it looks like I created this with border die cuts, but I made them with those stacking dies. Now this is a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card, just a top folding white note card that I made, gluing with a little bit of trim showing around the edge. Now, if you do not have any stacking die sets that have interesting edges like the faux stitching or scalloped edge here, you can use regular stacking die sets, and I'll show you that later in this video. With my other piece, I cut the ends off a little bit and added it to another note card for another fun design. Now, most of the sentiments I'm using today from Honeybee stamps are die sets like this one, where there are actually 3 dies together. One cuts a word, one cuts the shadow, and then one cuts an even bigger shadow with faux piercing around the edge. So I'm using the Hooray, and this one here, this one says congratulations. So in both cases, I die cut the word from black cardstock and glued the word onto a piece of vellum cut with the shadow die. I'm using Gina Connect adhesive, which is a great strong liquid adhesive, to put dots of glue on the back hidden behind the black die cut. And then I'll just go ahead and add that to my card and put something heavy on it while it dries. You can see this card didn't take very long to do, and I have a bunch of other pieces ready to make additional cards. I have lots of pieces left over. So here are the completed cards. I kept them very simple. I wanted to keep the focus on the fun pattern in the background and the texture that paper offers, and also that beautiful sentiment. Now the second card, I just added the Hooray, and in this case, I added some sequins, but also a few little gems, just to kind of add a little bit more interest. Now you may notice that the envelopes that I have in this video have been stamped with some small little messages. These are from a fun new stamp set. This is the Honey Bee Designs Angel Policy stamp set. This is a smaller stamp set, so the price point is excellent, and there are many small images on here that are great to stamp on the back of cards or on envelopes. There are messages such as "From my hands to your heart," handmade and heartfelt, "This is not junk mail," "Long live snail mail," "Consider this a paper hug." I like all of these messages, and I use some on envelopes and some on the inside of my cards today. Okay, I have a couple more examples using the same stacking die set, but this time I cut from cardstock. I did cut from 5 different colors of cardstock, took all the pieces apart, and then puzzle pieced them together so I had these colorful pieces. And there's tape on the back holding them together. Again, I'm going to cut it right down the middle from one corner to another so I have that nice diagonal cut. And then I will cut it again to end up with this little smaller piece. I have a bunch of pieces to use, so I'll show you 2 of the cards that I made. This one allows 2 corner pieces to overlap in the middle, and then I kept it very simple. I stamped a sentiment that I really like that says, "Thanks for being part of my tribe." I call all my crafty friends my tribe, and I thought this message was fantastic. I kept this one super simple, but I still think it's a fun way to use your stacking dies. Here's another one, a little more graphic. I trimmed down one of the halves of the stacked pieces and added it to the front of my card. And then I added a Honeybee Hugs die. That's black cardstock on a white shadow. And then I added some Tonic crystal glaze on the top for some shine. And I'll show you that in a few moments. You'll also see there are some flower sequins on here from Honeybee Designs, which I really like. Here's another example using the same scalloped and stitched square die set from Honeybee Stamps. But this time I'm going to show you how to make it look like those scallop squares are even bigger than they actually are. So I cut from some dark peach, medium peach, and light peach cardstocks. And here I took 3 of the largest squares and taped them together. I'm gluing them onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card, and this way it looks like a diamond shape. Once I have that glued down, I can go ahead and trim the sides off. Now I wanted to cover up those corners, so I took a few of the extra squares that I have left over and cut them into strips, so they look like little border strips. And then I will glue them onto the corners to cover them up. So it looks like I have even larger squares than I actually do. And since I have tons of those scalloped squares left over, I could easily have enough pieces to add these little corners in. I decided to use liquid adhesive just because it makes it faster, but you can use whatever adhesive you may have. Once I covered the front and trimmed the extra off, I added a hello die cut from Honeybee Stamps, and it's black cardstock hello with a vellum shadow. Next, I'm adding some white sequins. These are flower sequins that have a bit of dimension to them. Gorgeous. These are the vellum version. Very subtle color, but they're so beautiful in real life. And I added those with strong liquid adhesive and a cute little peach gem in the center of each. I did add Tonic Crystal Glaze, which is just a clear product, to the hello so that it has that beautiful shine to it. In the inside, I did stamp From My Hands to Your Heart from that Angel Policy stamp set I showed you earlier. Okay, here's another example using that same scallop stacking die set, but this time it looks like I created this with border dies, but I really just used that square die set. And this takes a lot less time than using border dies to get the same design. So I used that die set to cut from 5 colors of cardstock, And here I have a piece of scrap white cardstock that's about 4.5 inches wide and 8 inches long. I covered the front of it with some adhesive, and now I'm cutting each of my larger squares at the corner. By cutting it at the corner, I have some large scallop strips that I can use to look like border die cut strips. Once I have these all cut, I can start positioning them on my cardstock covered with adhesive. Now I did this on cardstock instead of directly onto my note card because I wasn't sure what kind of design I wanted. And by gluing it to the cardstock, I could then go ahead and do whatever I wanted with that piece to add it to a card. And since I used that stacking die set the way I did to cut these, each of these little strips is the same width, so they all fit together nicely and look nicely on the front of this. Now I did all of my strip arrangement on a really large piece of cardstock just so I could trim it down any way I wanted to add to the card. So here I'm trimming the sides to be about 4 inches wide and then about 5.5 inches tall. I'll then add this onto the front of a 4.25 by 5.5 inch white note card. And the best thing is I have lots of strips and squares left over to make additional cards. Now in this video I'm using a lot of the layered word dies from Honeybee, and I thought I'd show you a closer look. This is the Hello one. It's been out for a while and I've used it several times in the past. There are 3 dies. One cuts the word, one cuts the shadow, and one cuts the larger shadow with faux piercing. I just wanted to show you what that looked like. In all of my cards today, I only used the top 2 layers. I used liquid adhesive to add the delicate sentiment onto the shadow, and then put something heavy on there while it dries, which doesn't take long at all. I'll add this onto my rainbow background, along with a little sentiment that says handmade and heartfelt from that Angel Policy stamp set that I'm using on the inside of my cards and on the envelope. I also added a few candy hearts, just little white hearts from Honeybee. They're so cute. And here I'm covering my black sentiment die cut here with Tonic Crystal Glaze. This is a clear product that comes out very easily from the bottle, and it really evens out nicely on the die cut, and it dries to give a beautiful shine. I usually stack a couple of these black word die cuts on top of each other before adding the crystal glaze, but today I just did one, and it still has a lot of dimension to it. So there's a way you can use your stacking dies to create a background that looks like it was created with border dies but saves a lot of time. I have one more using the scalloped squares since I had so many left over, and I mixed a bunch together here on this card. I am again starting with a piece of white cardstock that's oversized. I drew a pencil line down the center and covered it with adhesive. Now I'm adding the squares to it, but I only want the bottom of the square, so I have one V. So I'm tearing off the top V, you could use scissors if you want, to add to it later. And by keeping it a square, I can make sure I'm keeping it straight. I'm using that line down the center to line it up. So I just keep on adding more and more here. The V's fit into each other just like a puzzle piece since the scallop edge is there. And I'm just covering the front of that white piece with all of these V's. I can then flip it over and trim the excess off. Ignore those pencil lines on the back. That was from a different technique that I was going to try and decided not to do. Now here I'm cutting off the extra white cardstock that's hanging out because I thought I would want to use this kind of as an arrow point on my design. I thought that'd be fun on the front of a card, but I changed my mind and decided to trim it down and cover the front of the card instead. Now I kept this simple and just added a Love You die cut. That's another one from Honeybee, where I cut the Love You from black cardstock and added it on to its shadow that was cut with white cardstock. Now there are many more designs that I could do with my leftover pieces, but I decided it was time to move on to a different stacking die set. This time I am using the scallop stitched circle dies. So this is a large circle, and I wanted to show you that circle stacking dies are great to use for fun card designs. Now this one happens to have the faux stitching and the scallop edge, but you could definitely use a regular circle stacking die set if you have that. So you can see that a lot of these stacking die sets are good basic ones that you can use to cut basic frames for your cards or something for a focal image. But instead of using them for basic designs, today I'm using them together to create these fun designs, just to show you how you can get more out of those stacking die sets. So here I created a circle and cut it in half, and look at all the fun ways you could arrange this on the front of a card. Many ways you can use them, but I decided to use them as simple little rainbows. So I just created the circle, cut it in half, and I have 2 pieces for 2 cards. I'm just using adhesive to add one of the rainbows onto the front of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card. Now you could put some heavyweight cardstock behind this to add it with foam adhesive, but I decided to glue it directly onto the card. Next, I'm creating a sentiment strip using the new Honeybee Love Bug stamp set. I really like the set because it's a bunch of words and you can build them together to create a bunch of different sentiments. So I decided to use individual words to stamp "You Brighten My Day." After I stamped it with black ink, I trimmed it with my cardstock so I'd have a simple sentiment strip. I like sets like this because you can create so many different sentiments from one set. I added the strip with some foam adhesive just for a bit of dimension, and also added a few sequins. You really could add a lot to this card design, but I decided to keep it quite simple. And there's a way you can use your circle stacking dies for a completely different look. Okay, my next example is definitely my favorite of the bunch. For this one, I used a set of stacking dies that are hexagons. This came out a while ago, and I've used this set in videos before, and I'll link to a video here. And I cut it from 4 different colors of cardstock. Now I used the dies connected because they still were. I hadn't cut them apart yet. But there I cut the larger die off so I could cut it from white cardstock to create a base to glue all these hexagons in place. Now, even though I cut that large die off, I can still do this technique. I just need to put tape on the back of the dies to connect them together while I do the die cutting. So here I'm placing hexagons in place, starting with the largest and working my way in, and alternating the colors as I go. And I have lots of leftover pieces for other cards. Now I'm using my trimmer to cut the hexagon apart. So I'm cutting from like one corner to another, and I end up with the triangles, these small triangles, that I can assemble in many different ways on my cards. So look through your stacking die sets. You probably have some circles or some squares with fun edges, or hexagons, or even hearts. You could do fun things with stacking heart die sets. And just think about different ways that you can glue them together and cut them apart to get new looks. So now that I have all of these little triangles, we can start assembling them on the front of a card. I'm using a white 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card. I did put a little pencil dot in the center of the card just so I had a place to kind of start from as I added them to the card. I didn't put the triangles right up against each other. I'm leaving a little bit of space to give it a different look. And I am using foam tape, so it has some added dimension to it. This is going to look really cool once it's all added down. Once I've added all of the pieces, I can flip it over and trim anything that's hanging off. And there we have a completely different look. In the center, I added a Hugs die cut from Honeybee. This time I used that navy cardstock on a white shadow, and I covered it with the Tonic crystal glaze. So think about all the different designs that you can get with those little triangle pieces that we cut up from the hexagons. I have one more example for you. This time I use a double-stitched square die set. I know many people have stacking dies with faux stitching, so I wanted to show you what this would look like. I cut these squares from 3 different colors of cardstock, and I'm going to piece some of them together onto a large white square. So I'm covered that white square with adhesive and pieced them together. So I have one large square. You could instead do the tape on the back again if you wanted to. I then cut them down so I had 4 triangles. Again, there are many ways you can arrange these triangles on a card, but I decided to use all 4 triangles on one card. So I started in 1/4. I decided to leave a little white trim around the edge, and then I worked my way around to cover the other 3 corners. Now when we get to the last corner, I'm going to lift up the first piece a bit so that one edge of it is tucked behind that first piece. So they all fit together nicely and you have that little window in the center. So you could do a lot with this card design. You could even use foam tape so there's more dimension to it. But I kept it simple and just stamped an I miss you right in the center. That I miss you is from this Honeybee Ham It Up stamp set. This stamp set has lots of fun sentiments in it, and I really like the fonts that they used. Now, I will say some of these have little pig sentiments, and the reason for that is it coordinates with this pig stamp set that they just came out with. I'm just showing you the pig stamp set since some of those messages in there might have been confusing if you didn't know they were meant to match up with this one. So I'm hoping to use that set in a future video. Okay, so there you have it, a bunch of ways to take your stacking dies and use them together to create graphic cards. If you are interested in the supplies that I use, they're linked below in my YouTube description, but go to my blog for more information. In the middle there are a couple other videos with more ways to use dies like the ones that I used today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon and have a great day.